All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to try and figure out, what turned Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, from, a math genius into, well, a terrorist, basically.
Yeah,
So we've got excerpts from his Wikipedia page, which, tells us about his life, the crimes, his whole ideology.
right.
So we're going up.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see, what we find when we peel back the layers here a little bit.
Yeah, because this guy, I mean, you look at his life and it's like, this is not your average dude.
Right.
A 167 IQ.
Yeah.
Skipping grades, goes to Harvard when he's 15. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, he was a prodigy. His mathematical abilities, I mean, they were off the charts. And, it wasn't just raw talent. He actually, won this really prestigious prize, the Sumner B. Myers Prize, for his doctoral dissertation at the University of Michigan, the best math dissertation of the year.
Wow.
So, talk about potential.
Yeah, you would think, a brain like that, you're guaranteed, groundbreaking career, success, all
Yeah.
that. And it seemed like he was on that path at first, right? He even became, an assistant professor at UC Berkeley.
Right.
And get this, the youngest in their history at the time.
Yeah, very prestigious position. But it wasn't a good fit for him.
Really?
He had a hard time with teaching. He avoided students, actively avoided them. And he preferred to just stick to the textbooks,
Yeah.
just really rigid.
Huh. It's interesting. While he was at Harvard, he was part of this controversial psychological study.
Right.
And some people think, it really messed with his worldview.
Yeah, the specifics of that are still kind of debated, but
Yeah.
it's pretty clear the whole experience just added to his disillusionment with academia and
Yeah.
and maybe even society in general.
Yeah, so it's 2 years into this Berkeley gig, he just quits. No explanation, nothing.
Right.
Just poof, gone.
Yeah, it doesn't seem totally out of the blue though. There were signs he was, isolating himself socially, and he just had a hard time connecting with people in general. He was this outsider, even though he was so smart.
Yeah.
So it seems like something was brewing inside him, for a while.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us to this big shift in his life. So 1971, he builds this tiny cabin near Lincoln, Montana. No electricity, no running water, totally off the grid. I mean, was he trying to find some peace, reject all this modern life stuff?
Seems like it, yeah. At first he seemed pretty content, just gardening and reading classic literature.
Yeah.
He was searching for a simpler way of living.
Yeah, disconnecting from a world he just didn't get anymore.
Exactly. But this peace, it wouldn't last.
Right.
There was this event, this pivotal event that just totally shattered Kaczynski's peace.
Yeah, and that's when things get, really dark.
Yeah. We'll get into that.
We will. Okay, so we left off with
Yeah.
Kaczynski, right? He's in Montana, in his cabin, trying to get away from it all. But we all know that peace didn't exactly last.
Yeah. No, it didn't. In his journals, actually, he talks about this one day,
Yeah.
really vividly. He finds this road, a road they cut right through this untouched wilderness area that he really loved.
Wow.
So you can imagine, right, this place he thought was safe, pristine. Suddenly it's violated. It wasn't just annoying for him. It was this deep personal betrayal.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And for him, this was a turning point. It was this event that shattered his whole idea of escaping the system. His
Yeah.
anger at the system, technology just grew and grew. And that yearning for, this being by himself, it turned into this burning need for revenge.
So instead of just staying in the woods, living his life, that's when he starts this 17-year bombing campaign.
Yeah.
Universities, airlines, computer stores, all of these places and people he saw as the face of technology and the destruction of nature.
Right. And the targets were not random. He picked them very carefully.
Huh.
They represented, what he saw as the evils of modern society.
And I mean, these weren't simple bombs either. He was really meticulous about making them, often even put the initials FC for Freedom Club on the parts, even though he was acting alone. It's kind of creepy how much planning and precision went into it all.
It does, yeah. It really shows how committed he was to this, twisted logic that fueled his actions. He really believed he was fighting a war, against a system he saw as, just inherently destructive.
But it wasn't all about bombs, right? He also wanted a platform to spread his ideology, and that's where the manifesto comes in.
Exactly. In 1995, he kind of took a gamble.
Yeah.
Sent letters to these big newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post, and basically said, if you print my my manifesto, this 35,000 word thing I wrote called, Industrial Society and Its Future, I'll stop the bombings.
Wow.
Pretty bold move.
Super controversial. But the Washington Post actually agreed to publish it.
They did, yeah. And it's kind of ironic because this act of publishing it, meant to give him a voice and maybe even save lives, it actually led to his downfall.
Yeah, because his brother, David, recognized his writing in the manifesto and, turned him in.
He did, and that led to Kaczynski's arrest in 1996.
It's crazy how that, backfired on him.
It really is, yeah.
But even in that moment, right, desperate to be heard, he still had to be in control. He said if some, less reputable place printed it first, like Penthouse or something, he'd still set off one last bomb, a really deadly one.
Chilling, isn't it? Really shows how calculated he was. He needed to be in control, even of his own capture.
So, okay, we've kind of laid out, how he was caught, but what about, the ideas behind it all? What was it about technology and modern society that pushed him to this point?
Well, that's where the manifesto gets really interesting. It lays out this, some might say disturbing view of humanity's relationship with technology. And it's something that still resonates with people today, even though it's in a very different context.
Right. And of course, we're not endorsing any of this, right? We're just trying to understand it.
Exactly. It's important to be clear about that. Exploring these ideas, it lets us, really look at the potential downsides of technology and maybe think about how we can deal with those challenges responsibly and ethically.
All right. So we've spent a lot of time on Ted Kaczynski's, life and all that. But let's get into, the real meat of his thinking, right?
Right.
His actual ideology, all that's laid out in his manifesto, this industrial society and its future thing.
Right. And again, just to be clear, we're not agreeing with him here. We're just, trying to unpack it all.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So basically he lays out this pretty dark view of how humans relate to technology. He's saying the whole industrial revolution, even with all the good stuff, it's been a disaster for us.
Yeah, he thought technology basically creates this society where we're increasingly detached from, nature, meaningful work, and that leads to all this psychological suffering. He even had a term for it, the problem of human purposelessness.
Right, right. And then there's what was it, surrogate activities, how we try to fill that void.
Exactly. We chase these artificial goals to, feel like we have power and control.
So constantly checking social media,
right,
or obsessing over work stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Or even something as simple as collecting stamps. It might seem harmless, but he saw all that as distractions from our real needs as humans.
It's funny because he wasn't totally off base. We're realizing more and more how technology can be good and bad for us.
Oh, absolutely. And he called this need to be in control, this inherent need, the power process. And in a technologically advanced society, that need gets messed with. We're surrounded by systems and stuff we don't get, so we feel powerless, unfulfilled.
Okay, so if technology is the problem, what was his solution? Obviously, we know what he did was totally wrong, but what did he actually say in the manifesto?
He wanted to completely dismantle the system, go back to a simpler, more primitive way of life. He thought that was the only way to be truly free and happy.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty radical. It's hard to imagine, going back to that kind of life, But it is kind of interesting to think about, do any of his points still hold up today?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, his methods were terrible, but some of his worries about technology, they're even more relevant now with, smartphones and all that. We're super connected, but there's also more loneliness, more anxiety.
Yeah.
We're flooded with info, but it's hard to find, real meaning.
It makes you wonder, right? If he was around today, would he be even more extreme?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's impossible to know for sure, but his story definitely serves as a warning. We got to be careful about how technology impacts us, and try to find a balance so we don't lose our humanity.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. A super complex, disturbing story. Brilliant guy, but obviously what he did was awful. But exploring his thinking, even though it's flawed, makes us think about some big questions, right? About technology, society, and what it means to be human in this, increasingly tech-driven world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that progress isn't always a straight line. We always got to be thinking about how technology is shaping us, for better or worse.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Unabomber. Until next time, keep thinking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.